Next on my list of compounds that have been shown in peer-reviewed research to improve neuronal and brain function is creatine. Creatine can be derived from meat sources. It can also be supplemented. Some of you are probably familiar with creatine or have heard about creatine from the context of the health and fitness world, where creatine is used to bring more water into muscles, which can enhance the strength of those muscles, as well as bring water into other tissues. So it doesn't just draw more water into muscle, it can draw more water into the body generally. Creatine has also been shown to have an important role in brain function. And once again, this is something that came up during the discussion about depression a few episodes back. Creatine can actually be used as a fuel source in the brain, and there's some evidence that it can enhance the function of certain frontal cortical circuits that feed down onto, or rather connect to, areas of the brain that are involved in mood regulation and motivation. And that's where creatine plays a role in depression, or rather where creatine supplementation seems to be able to assist in some forms of mild depression. That's in emerging literature. It's still not well established. However, there is now ample evidence that creatine supplementation can enhance brain function in certain contexts. And if you're interested in learning more about what those contexts are, there's an excellent review that just came out. The first author is Roschel, Roschel. We will provide a link to this study, this review, in the caption. This was published just very recently in 2021. And one thing to make clear is that creatine supplementation has been shown to be especially useful for people that are not consuming any meat or other sources of foods that are rich in creatine. What is the threshold level of creatine to supplement in order to get the cognitive benefit? Appears to be at least 5 grams per day. Now, the most typical form of creatine is so-called creatine monohydrate. There are other forms of creatine as well, some of which are thought to not draw as much water into non-muscle tissues. And for some people, that's attractive to them. They don't want water sitting below their skin, etc. I should emphasize that the responses to creatine in that sense can differ. Some people get a little bit of water retention. Some people experience more. There's some evidence that creatine can impact some of the hormonal pathways, that it might enhance levels of so-called dihydrotestosterone, DHT. And therefore, because DHT is involved in hair loss, there are these theories that creatine can cause hair loss. And indeed, for people that are very DHT sensitive, it might. There's going to be a lot of variation person to person in terms of how much creatine impacts DHT and how many DHT receptors they have on their scalp, and therefore whether or not they experience hair loss. I'm just giving you all this information so that you're aware of the various things that creatine can do. But nonetheless, I think it's interesting that creatine supplementation of 5 grams per day, that's creatine monohydrate, has been shown to improve cognition in people that aren't getting creatine from animal sources. And there's some evidence detailed within the review that I just described, that creatine supplementation can also enhance cognition in people that are also eating animal products. So I personally take creatine 5 grams per day and have for a very long time. I can't say that I've noticed a tremendous benefit because I've actually never really come off it. And so I've never done the control experiment. I take it more as kind of a baseline insurance policy for me. I'm certainly losing some of my hair, whether or not that's due to creatine or not. I've never done the analysis. But what I can say is that I generally consume these things like EPAs, creatine, alpha GPC to set a general context of support for my neurons, for my brain. And of course, I also pay attention to the foods that contain these various compounds. So I don't actively eat additional meat just to obtain creatine. I eat a fairly limited amount of meat. I don't restrict it, but I do eat meat. But I don't actively seek out creatine in my diet. Rather, I use supplementation in order to hit that 5 grams per day threshold.